people that do not believe, and can you change their thoughts?
You know, Zelda, it's a very interesting question that you're asking, because in my experience, everybody who's angry about faith is actually a believer. What I mean to say is that if somebody doesn't believe in something, they don't get upset about it. They don't get frustrated about it. They don't get emotional about it. And invariably, what I have found is that people are not ambivalent to faith and religion, but they get emotionally engaged and oftentimes visibly upset, which says to me that they very strongly believe in God. They're just not sure how to relate to God and what to deal, or how to deal and what to do with the neshama that they received. You there, Zelda?
Yeah, I'm listening.
What do you think? You asked a question that's...
You know what? I think everybody at a certain time in their lives reaches out to God, reaches out to Hashem. It's just inevitable. No matter how much they say they are a non-believer, when they're going through difficult times, they always somehow reach out to God. Do you agree?
I think oftentimes people will reach out to God when things are difficult and their comfort zone has been shaken. I don't think that's a good thing. It's an inevitable thing. My focus, Zelda, has always been to help people engage with our Creator, with God, out of goodness, not out of trial and travail. People say there are no atheists in the foxholes. When everything crumbles around you, suddenly you fall back on intrinsic or innate truths. The truth is that we all, deep at our core, are a piece of God. Every soul is a piece of God. It's invariable that when all of the superficial or external layers are peeled away, that the true essence or subconsciousness will emerge. But it's unfortunate that it takes a collapse of our orbit for us to reach in and self-actualize on a spiritual level. We should be trying to self-actualize, and we should be trying to realize the extraordinary potential that God endowed us with out of goodness, not out of pain, suffering, or deprivation.
Okay, I'm going to play the devil's advocate in this regard. When you look at the world, Rabbi Kaplan, the way it is, and the fighting and the hate and the strife that people are going through, how do you find it so easy to believe in Hashem? How do you find it? Well, you're a rabbi, that's your job, but how do we find it when we go through difficult times?
Okay, there's a couple of issues there, Zelda. So, firstly, you said, I find it so easy. I don't know that I find it easier than anybody else. We all struggle. We struggle about different things, and perhaps struggle in different levels, but we all struggle. And that's not easy. It's not easy for anybody. The Yetzer Hara, as we call it, the evil inclination, and the selfish nature of our animal soul invariably gets in the way. And we have to overcome those challenges, and they're not simple, and it's not easy for anybody. In fact, the Talmud states, Kol hagodol mechaverei, anybody who stands at a higher spiritual or ethical stature than their peer, yitzri gadol himeno, they also have a greater Yetzer Hara or evil inclination. I would make a controversial statement that we all struggle equally, because remember, struggle has everything to do with two sides of the tug of war. You know, that each side is pulling, and each side pulls with great force. And if you have greater challenges or struggles, you also have greater spiritual reservoirs of courage and strength. So we all struggle, and we all struggle equally, and it's not easy for anybody. The second thing that I would take exception to the statement that, well, you're a rabbi, what about the rest of us? A rabbi's job is to teach. It's everybody's mission and mandate to believe in Hashem. And on some level, it's everybody's mission and mandate to teach. When the Torah tells us that we have a mitzvah to study Torah, it uses the terminology v'shinantam levonecha. You should teach your children. And your children, our sages explained, means all of those who are in your circle of influence. If you are able to influence other people, you are duty bound to try and achieve that. So we're all teachers. We're all people of faith, meaning we all have a soul. And we were all given the mission of trying to connect to our Creator and make our world a godlier and goodlier place.
Okay, I'm always having an argument with my Israeli friend who, if I bring God into the picture, she gets very upset and tells me it's people that are making the mistakes. Look, with all of these children being killed by one lunatic, okay? And so you have to separate where was God. How do you, because that's what people bring in right away. I
am always amazed, Zelda, at how people are so quick to ask the question, where is God? And slow to ask the question, where is man? Where are we? How did we allow our society to spin out of control? How did we allow our society to become so godless? How did we allow our society to become so soulless? Those are the haunting questions that nobody's asking. We ask questions of law enforcement and why didn't the system catch the criminal? We ask questions of, well, where was God? And nobody asks the question, where are we? I don't have the answers to inexplicable things like human suffering. I'm glad I don't. I don't want to ever understand people suffering. I don't want to ever gloss over the pain and the agony that people feel. If anything, it's a privilege for me to provide some kind of comfort, bereavement, or solace, not explanations. You'll never get an explanation from me as to why somebody suffered. In fact, I think it's a terrible thing to do.
So you're telling me that many of your parishioners or synagogue goers never share with you their pain in the loss of a loved one, or
I'm not sure where you heard that. I didn't say they don't share with me. They share with me things like that all the time. What I don't share with them is rationale, rhyme, or reason as to why they suffered or why bad things happen.
And they haven't asked you those questions.
Many people do ask those questions. It doesn't mean I have to answer every question. I'm not capable of answering that question. I get asked questions all the time, Zelda. If I know the answer, I'm happy to offer it. If I know where to find the answer, I'll get to work and try and find it. If I don't know the answer, I'm not embarrassed or ashamed to say I don't know. And when it comes to questions like this, not only am I quick to say I don't know, I'd add I don't want to know. I don't want to understand human suffering. I don't want to rationalize or be comfortable with the fact that people are in agony. I don't think any of us should want an answer for that. There is no answer.
How do you comfort a human being if you don't give them something to move forward with?
You know, Zelda, answers are intellectual things. And comfort is an emotional thing. It's often talked about the difference between a hug and a handshake. A handshake is face-to-face. You're looking at the person, you're connecting with the person you're speaking to. When you're giving somebody a hug, you're not looking at them at all. In fact, your face is so close to them that you're seeing whatever's behind that individual. For some reason, people sometimes want a hug because the hug represents an acceptance that's unconditional. It's not based on our eye contact or the relationship that we are experiencing on a superficial level. It means that there's something more deep, something more profound. I don't think people are looking for intellectual answers when they are in deep emotional pain. I think what they're looking for is empathy, and they're looking for sympathy, and they're looking to know that you care about them. I once read many years ago a book that was written by a rabbi who had successfully led a congregation for many decades. And he shared his, his mistakes, his foibles, his successes. And I found it very interesting to read. I learned a lot from this book. It's called Tales Out of Shul. And one of the things he says is that a rabbi should be a good speaker, a rabbi should be a good communicator, a rabbi should be a good administrator, a rabbi should be organized, all the things that rabbis should be, some of which I'm somewhat successful at, some of which I'm not very good at all. But he said, if a rabbi isn't a good speaker and isn't a good administrator and isn't great with his time, he said the congregation may forgive them. The one thing a congregation will never forgive its rabbi for is if a rabbi doesn't care. What people are looking for more than anything else is love. What people are looking for more than anything else is that you care about them. I think it was the late chief rabbi of Great Britain, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who said that the question he gets asked most often isn't theological, philosophical, or halachic. The question that he gets asked most often was, Rabbi, do you remember me? People want to know that you know them and care about them. And that's comforting. Giving people theological answers when they are in deep agony or pain over suffering or loss is a very bad idea, and it doesn't work. It's not effective. Besides that, just between us, it's all not true either. Because mortals cannot understand God, and we can't understand human suffering, and we don't have a way to grasp or fathom why God does what he does in the manner that he does. Somebody once asked the Alter Rebbe, he said, if you were God, what would you do? And the Alter Rebbe says, if I was God, I'd do exactly what God does. They said, what do you mean? You agree with A, B, and C, and they went on to enumerate a litany of suffering people in bad situations. And the Alter Rebbe said, no, I don't agree with any of that, and I'm horrified by it and pained by it. That's because I'm not God. We know that God is perfect, and God knows what he's doing. I have no clue what God's doing. But I'm not given that purview. It's not my job to be God's lawyer or to be God's assistant or advisor. My job as a Jew, as a human being, is to connect to God and try to live in a godly fashion. My job as a rabbi is to try to teach people how they can do this themselves as well. And that's the story of life. The story of life is asking the big questions of not why is God doing what he does, why am I doing what I do? Not why did God, or how could God do better, how can I do better? And I think if we'd ask questions like that, honest questions, brutal questions to ourselves, and make demands of ourselves, the world would be a better place.
So, how does a family get past the brutal killing of a child? Like, you believe in God, you believe in goodness, and then something like this happens. How do you move forward?
Zelda, I can't, that's certainly not a one-size-fits-all question. How does a family move forward? How do individuals move forward? I think that each person has to reach deep into his or herself and to find the reservoirs of spiritual strength that they've been endowed to be able to cope with challenge, loss, pain, or suffering. And it's somewhat ridiculous for us to talk about that in a cookie-cutter fashion. It's almost like saying, how do people fix their marriages? Every marriage is different, and every couple has to work on their unique relationship in their unique way. Our relationship with God is very much like a marriage. So we need to work on fixing our marriage, so to speak. We need to work on improving our relationship with God. And oftentimes that relationship gets tested. It's not for you or I to judge anybody who is reeling from tragedy or to make assumption or maybe even give them advice. It is our job to be there to show love, empathy, support. It's also our job to try to figure out how to fix our broken society, and it is broken.
Well, I agree with you on that. And it's not so much as fixing it, it's just living day to day to get past it. Or to do
living day to day that's like a Band-Aid solution. It means you're not going to heal things, you're just going to deal with symptoms, and you're going to try to paper the things over or take painkillers as needed. That's not a good plan. It's not a strategy for health. The holistic strategy should be to find the source of the ailment and heal it at that spot so that you don't have to deal with symptoms or the cuts and bruises that are being caused. Something is wrong with our society. Something is rotten, something is sick. We did not see this 50 years ago. We didn't see this 30 years ago. We didn't even see this 25 years ago. Why is the question we have to ask ourselves. What has changed in our society? And it's not the proliferation of handguns, because there were, and I don't know this for a fact, and I didn't do the research, but I'll be very surprised to hear that we live in a time with more handguns than we had before. I don't think that's where society's changing. It may be, and if it is, I stand corrected, and then the answer is taking away the handguns. But if it's not, then the answer is not taking away the handguns, even if that can make somewhat of a difference. Somehow criminals always get their hands on guns anyway. It's the people whose guns weren't used to kill other people who have them taken away. And I'm not saying that I'm for people owning guns or that it's a good idea. I happen to personally think it's not a good idea. And I don't see why people need to have firearms or weapons. But the point I'm making is we need to take an honest look at what has changed in society. What wasn't the case decades ago? What is the case today? And maybe that's a hint to diagnose what's gone wrong. I have to tell you, our society focuses, Zelda.
Okay, it's mankind. Okay, humankind. The word human is no longer important. I mean, if 6 million Jews and others and so many other Holocausts have taken place, this is the one that I'm aware of and the one that I feel is the worst because it was at one people. Okay? They killed them because they were Jews. So I don't really see any real moving forward with mankind because nothing seems to have changed. There are good people and there are bad people.
I don't see any corollary in what you're saying. I don't see how this is at all related to anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. Here we see acts of indiscriminate violence. It's not hatred towards a particular group of people. It's not a racism or anti-Semitism for the people that this person killed, which is horrific in and of itself. Here is we have indiscriminate, monstrous violence. This maniac, horrible monster killed his own grandmother and then went and killed and shattered and ruined.
Dead. I think she's still alive.
Okay, well that's what I heard. I can't tell you that I listen to every iota of news because it really doesn't in any way help me or make my life any better. So I'm aware of what's going on. I don't think we have to know every detail of facts and figures to know that we have a problem. There's an issue, a problem with hatred and anti-Semitism. That's an issue. It's a problem. It's not the one we're talking about now. There's an issue and a problem with school shootings, workplace shootings, with violence, with people who are indiscriminately killing other people. What is going on? What is wrong with our society? Why is this happening? It didn't happen in the past. And again, I take you back to that question. What has changed? Our society is more sensitive. Our society is supposedly more compassionate. Our society is worried about pronouns. Our society doesn't want to offend anybody. Our society really hyper-focuses on trying to create equality amongst all peoples and trying not to marginalize anybody. So it's not that our society has become more hateful per se. If you ask me, Zelda, our society has become less God conscious. We have a godless society. We mock and denigrate faith and religion at every turn. That's what's changed. You talked about humanity. In Torah, a human being is called an Adam. The word Adam comes from the Hebrew etymology of Adamah. Adamah means in the image of. Human beings were taught that they are created in the image of God and that they have to strive to be godly and to live lives that are filled with holiness, mission, purpose, and spirituality. And we're living in a society that mocks and laughs at that doesn't call people created in the image of God, rather creates idols or gods in their own image and denigrates and mocks monotheism and faith. That's what's changed in our society. If you ask me, Zelda, I will tell you that the Rebbe taught and believed that the society would get better if people would think about God, if there would be a moment of silence in every school, if children were raised not only to have excellence in academia, mathematics and science and technology, literature and social studies, but anthropology, but if children were raised and taught about the importance of faith. And it doesn't mean you have to focus on a specific faith system. A moment of silence means that you start your day thinking about a super being, a creator, who put us in this world, in this universe, with a purpose. What that purpose is and what that meaning is, that's the job of parents. The school doesn't have to talk about that, but I think the school has to facilitate a moment of silence, and the school has to facilitate spirituality, and we have to stop mocking and denigrating spirituality if we want our society to become a better place.
Okay, so why does a young person, 18 or whatever age, have so much hate within themselves that they would actually go out and kill young children, his grandma? I think she's still alive. If that's what I heard.
You know, Zelda. I'm also streaming live on Facebook, and one of my friends, a wonderful woman named Nardia from Europe, just wrote, "That's it, liberal godlessness," and I think she's right. That's exactly what our problem is. We have raised children godlessly. We have laughed, mocked, and denigrated the idea that a human being is created in God's image. We talk about abortion as if it's some kind of fantastic mitzvah. And I'm not saying that sometimes there isn't just cause for an abortion. That's a conversation, that's a discussion we have to have. And when a mother's life is in danger, to sacrifice her life to save the life of her unborn child is, from a Jewish perspective, wrong. But to have this notion that it means nothing, that until a human being is born, human life means nothing, that's a godless attitude. It's an attitude that focuses only on flesh, only on materialism, only on selfishness. And when you have children that are raised in environments like this, when this is what arts and entertainment, when this is what popular culture is filled with, how could you expect something different?
But do you think that religion is the answer to everything? There are rabbis and priests and amirs and you name it that are not totally committed to their group. They're totally committed to power and money as well in many cases.
You know, let me ask you a funny question. There are bad doctors. There are quacks. There are doctors who are just trying to make money and don't really care about their patients. Does that in any way, shape, or form disqualify the medical practice? Does it say that all doctors are bad because there are some bad doctors? Yes, there are bad rabbis. I take tremendous umbrage at those bad rabbis, and I feel personally offended by them. There are ignorant rabbis. Some of the people who even affiliate with my own movement are ignorant. It rankles me. I can't stand it. A rabbi should be learned and sensitive, and he has to have a noble spirit. Okay, there are bad rabbis. That doesn't disqualify religion, and it doesn't make all rabbis bad. It's so funny how we don't judge in generalities when it comes to the color of people's skin, but we're quick to judge the color of their hat or suit. Like, why is that okay to label an entire group of people, many of whom live selfless lives because of a few selfish bad apples? And I'm not accusing you of doing this. People do it all the time, and it's wrong, and it's inappropriate. And just as we don't want to judge people by the color of their skin, but rather by the content of their character, we shouldn't be judging people by the color of their clothing or the shape of their hat.
I'm not accusing everyone. There are the very best and there are the very least. I mean, there's some people strive, like you, I think you do, to do the very best, and others people just strive to live day to day. And I know people like that. That doesn't mean they're bad, but they're just not of a higher caliber.
Zelda, we can all do better. I'm not such a tzaddik. Right. I make many mistakes myself. We can all do better. And it's all, you know, more important than anything else, Zelda, is to have a focus on trying to be better. How many people actually think about trying to be better? How many people spend a significant portion on a daily basis of their time, and whether significant means 5 minutes or 5 hours, but I'm talking about a chunk of time, a real chunk of time, stopping and thinking about their soul, the fact that they were created, that they occupy a particular place in time and space, and that there's a purpose to life. How many people think about that, contemplate that on a daily basis? By the way, that's called prayer. And we should be doing that. And far too many people, Zelda, even in my own orbit, and sometimes I make this mistake. Instead of contemplating and thinking about God, we read words and turn pages and think about all kinds of foolishness and narishkeit and call that davening. Well, it isn't davening. It isn't prayer. Prayer is mindfulness, and prayer is about God consciousness. And yes, you have to read the words because that's what Jewish law says. I'm reminded of a story about an extraordinary chassid who recently passed away. His name is Rabbi Mendel Kaplan. He's a brilliant, brilliant person who would spend a tremendous amount of time contemplating, thinking, and meditating before he would be able to actually articulate and write his teachings down. He was the chief scribe of the Rebbe. So the story goes that it's a Shabbos afternoon, and he's been contemplating and thinking about God for hours. And his wife says, Rabbi Yael, she says, Yael, I'm hungry. Let's make kiddush. Let's move on. He says, when are you going to daven? And he says, Leah, I davened already. I just have to say the words. It's such a beautiful, poignant, sweet story. He's telling his wife, I have to follow Jewish law. I'm going to actually say the words of davening. I was at the minyan this morning. I answered the Amen, the Baruch Hu, the Heshmei Rabbah. But I've been thinking about God, because davening is not about reading words. Davening is about thinking about God, and how few people think about God when they pray. How few people who are very religious are actually being mindful of God instead of thinking about themselves. So these are the things we have to work at, Zelda. And yes, there are lots of rabbis who fail, and lots of religious people who aren't really that religious at all, and they're just going through the motions.
But there are good people who don't believe in God. I mean, there must be some godliness within them, but they're good. They do wonderful things for others. But if you ask them, they say, no, I don't go to church, synagogue, I don't go.
That's fine, Zelda. I didn't say you have to be religious to be good. I will say that you need to have God in your life to be all you can be, to be as good as you can be. So you have a person who is naturally sweet and kind and sensitive, and that person doesn't focus on their soul or their relationship with God at all, and they're doing all these good things. They're a good Samaritan. They help other people. They care about other people, and they're not so obsessed with their own selfish gain. If they would have God in their life, how much better they would be. And the fact that they are better than the neighbor who does have God in his life, who would be so much worse off if they wouldn't have God in their life.
Yeah, but there are people who profess to have God in their life and go out and do all kinds of terrible things.
I'm not responsible for what people profess. I don't care what they. I don't care what they profess.
There are people out there who are wealthy and they got their money not through the praying to God.
Zelda, everybody gets everything through God, whether they know it or not. There's no self-made man. There's God-made man. And everything, all of our success comes from a higher place. We can make efforts, and we're responsible to make those efforts. But
why do bad people get good things?
I don't know why bad people get good things, and I don't know why good people suffer, and we mentioned that earlier. I can't give you an answer for that, and frankly, I don't want to understand that. I don't want to understand human suffering. I never want to become ambivalent to human suffering. I never want to rationalize human suffering. That's a terrible thing. And God didn't give us that knowledge, and he doesn't have that expectation of us. He never asked us to justify human suffering. He never asked us to explain why people suffer. He asked us to comfort them. He asked us to help them. He asked us to dress and clothe the naked and feed the hungry and comfort the bereaved. That's what God asked us to do. He didn't ask us to come to the person who's naked and explain why he's impoverished and why he doesn't have clothing. He didn't ask us to come to the hungry person and tell the hungry person, you must be a terrible sinner and that's why you're so hungry. That's not our job. That's not our purview. We should focus on the job we were given. And the job we were given is to make a difference in people's lives, a positive difference. I'll tell you something that I must have said this on air before. It's like, for me, it helps crystallize things. I said, you don't have to be a believer in God to be a good person. I said, but the atheist community will never produce a Mother Teresa. It'll never produce the highest level of selflessness. It'll never produce the highest level of compassion and care and concern. And the good people who are atheists or agnostic or claim to be would be so much better if they would have God in their life. I believe that every single human being lives a better life when he or she has God in their life. And the fact that
I don't disagree, and we're totally out of time. We have to move along, but I thank you very much for your input and your sensible thoughts and ideology, and I hope that people will gain, what they can from our discussion this morning, and hopefully we'll talk to you again.
Well, Zelda, thank you very much for having me on air. It's an honor, and it's a privilege. And I want to remind all of our listeners, before I say goodbye, that they are created in God's image, that they are endowed with otherworldly possibilities, and if we will only all try a little harder, we hope and we pray that very speedily and in our day, the answer to all of these questions will come in the form of the coming of Mashiach and a new world order where suddenly everything will become clear to us and we will live wonderful lives that are punctuated with the greatest sense of fulfillment and inner satisfaction, continuing to grow in our knowledge of, relationship with, and appreciation for our common Creator. May we merit the coming of Mashiach and all of those wonderful things, b'meheira u'biyameinu, speedily, and in our days. And until we get there, go do another mitzvah now.
Amen.
Thank you, my friends, for joining. Have a wonderful day.